So aliens. I watched Disclosure Day a couple days ago, and it was a really good movie. And I hope everything in it is true. It would make way more sense than what we have going on down here now. But I've never had my own. I've seen some weird things, but I've never seen anything that it says, okay, that's aliens. And I saw one thing that I was just out in California when I was truck driving. I was 100% positive that I saw an alien. It was this huge cloud, like onion-shaped cloud plume thing. And then I learned that rockets look like that when they take off at night, and this was at night, just before sunset. So anything I've ever seen has been proven to be something from here. But back in the 90s, I was stationed in Europe as an Air Force cop. And I was what they called a PRP cop. And that meant Personnel Reliability Program. So it just means that they called us nuclear security cops, but we were really rated to guard anything. We went through a little bit of extra training and a whole lot more background checks and stuff. But it just gave us, I had a secret clearance. I didn't even have a top secret clearance. Oh, did I? I don't know, I don't remember. I think it was just secret. Yeah, mine was secret and my buddy's was top secret. So anyways, I was stationed in England, been there, a few months, and there was this thing called a 30-30 recall, and everybody who had been stationed there before absolutely hated this thing. And what it is it's 30 police on scene in 30 minutes. And they would just do random ones, just to test us. And, everybody hated doing it because it was just a complete waste of time, in our opinion. But I was new. I was gung-ho, I wanted to do one. And I had never done one before. So they have this thing called the claxton. I don't even know what that word means, but maybe it's a British term. I don't know. But the claxton was this horrible sounding hum of a bell. Wasn't really a bell, wasn't really a hum, but somewhere in between. And it sounded terrible. And it was meant to wake you up. And this thing went off one night at like 2:30 in the morning. Now when the claxton goes off, it's in our dorms. It's in the dorm rooms. I think people who live off base get a call, but this is mainly for dorm room people. They want 30 bodies on scene in 30 minutes. The brass can, take a little longer, I'm sure. But there was this bell that rang through the dorm, a horrible sound, and it would wake you up. And everyone told me, they're like, don't volunteer for anything, And but see, the thing is also the base gates were watching for cops leave if the klaxon went off, and they would be taking names. They'd be writing down your license plate or taking your name down if they saw you leaving the base, because you're not supposed to leave the base when the klaxon goes off. But anyways, I wanted to do it. I wanted to see what it was about. And it was that first one was completely boring. I hated it. It was cold, it was wet, and I did not enjoy it at all. Well, a few months go by and we get a message that a VIP was coming in. And now the base I was stationed at had generals and everything coming and going all the time. It was a very secure base, and it was, I guess, an important base. We'll just put it that way. Anytime a 4-star was coming through, I would say 2 and 3 and 4 stars, all that, they stayed at our base. We had, at the time at least, the nicest billeting, which, really wasn't that great, but, it was kind of like a Holiday Inn, and every other base in the area had, like a Motel 6. So our billeting or hotel base was, our hotel base hotel was the nicest in the area. And there was, 3 fighter wings there, so it was a pretty important base. There were other things there that we guarded that's not classified, but I don't want to talk about what I actually did. But anyways, so we got a heads up like the day before that a VIP was coming through. And they didn't know exactly when, they don't really keep on schedule, they give you a rough estimate, but, they just told us to be prepared in the next 24 hours for a 30-30 recall. And I was already thinking, I'm like, I am going to find a way out of this because I don't want to do it, So if bugs crawl on me, I'm going to get mad. But anyway, so I don't know, it was probably about 9:30 at night, something like that, England time. And there was this, the klaxon went off. I didn't work that day, so I was like, I'm not gonna chance leaving the base, and having somebody write my name down and me get in trouble. So I was like, you know what, I'll do it. I was well rested, and so the klaxon goes off, and I go to the guard mount hut, which is where we all met to arm up and get our assignments. So I go to the base, or go to the guard mount hut, and I get a 249 because I had a heavy gunner cert, which I hate. That was another thing I volunteered for, was a heavy gunner certification. I never should have volunteered for that. They tell you don't volunteer for stuff for a reason. And I thought, when I was in tech school, I was like, heavy gunner, that's going to be awesome. No, it just means you carry this heavy gun around and a whole lot more ammo than everybody else. And it was miserable. And I was qualified to draw the 249, the 203, and the 249 is, we call it the saw. It's meant to lay down firepower, just suppressive fire. So if anybody, if our position got attacked, it was just meant for nothing to survive downrange. But it was really heavy, and it was miserable carrying it around. And but anyways, so I went to the guard mount hut. They assigned me a 249, and I went and stood in formation, waiting for the briefing. So we had 30 cops in there, so the people, the brass was, in a good mood because they actually had 30 people show up, and they start, telling us what's going on. So it turns out the VIP was President Clinton, and I just thought that was cool. I kind of wanted to be an FBI Secret Service agent or whatever, always kind of wanted to be a cop as a kid. And they said, President Clinton's coming and we're going to guard him. And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. So it wasn't. But they were giving us assignments, and they had these big school buses pull up, and we'd have about 10 people getting each one. We all, we had our big guns and our equipment and all that. And it was a Secret Service agent that was on the bus, and so he was taking people and dropping them off where they wanted us to be. And I thought this was the coolest thing in the world. So I get on the bus, and we go way out to the end of the airfield, and I got off the bus, and there was we're usually in a guard shack or something, but there was no guard shack or nothing. There was just me, a taxiway, the runway, the base fence was a couple hundred yards away, and a manhole. The big round manhole covers in the ground. And that Secret Service agent, we got out, and he's like, all right, Ren, this is where you're going to be. And he put a piece of tape across that manhole, and it said U.S. Secret Service on it. And he said, if anybody tries to break the seal on that manhole, I want you to kill them. And then he got back on the bus and drove away. And I'm telling you, it's like dark. I'm out here in the middle of nowhere with a flashlight, little tiny flashlight, and that was it. No, you know, I think there was, we called them light-alls, these big, huge lights. You know, there was one out there, so I wasn't completely in the dark, but you get the picture. It was fairly dark, and I was all by myself in the haunted section, which I'll tell you about later. But my excitement quickly faded when he said I was just guarding that piece of tape across that manhole. So basically it was the sewer system down there, and they thought of everything apparently, and they didn't want anybody crawling up through the manholes. So of course they're not going to let an airman who had been in for like less than a year guard the president, although they actually did, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But anyways, so put that piece of tape down and told me to guard it. I'm standing out there 2-3 hours, who knows, you know, the time just was going by fast and slow at the same time, and it was just miserable. But then I start seeing lights in the distance, and it got closer and closer and closer, and it was the coolest thing ever. It was Air Force One coming into land, and I am telling you what, if you've never seen a 747 up close, I mean, I would have just been a couple hundred yards away from the runway, and this thing came right over my head and landed. It was the most beautiful, exciting thing I had ever seen. And then I go back to guarding my piece of tape. I don't know how many hours went by, but eventually they came by to relieve me, and I got to go home. And I got to talk to one of my friends who was at the same 3030 recall, who had a top secret clearance. And that conversation was very interesting. I'm going to title this video Presidents and Aliens, and you'll see why. But I got back, I think it was the next day or whatever, and everyone was kind of talking about the recall, and you know how it was you know, exciting, I guess, to have the president come and visit. I never got to see him or anything, but my best friend did. And it was the same guy in both situations of the president and the aliens that this happened to. So first of all, so I guess he had a top secret clearance. Maybe not every, I guess I didn't have one. I had a secret clearance. So I guess other people had top secret clearances. I don't know. Maybe you could apply for it or something. I don't know. I never really cared about all that, because, you know, the more secret clearance you have, the more work you got to do. But you had to have a secret clearance to be a PRP cop. But my buddy had a top secret clearance, and his 3030 experience with the president's visit was a lot different than mine. And he was telling me all about it. And he's like, I'm not sure if I should be telling you this. And I was like, well, I'm not going to tell anybody. It turns it was not classified or anything. It was not, to my knowledge. Now, we didn't have the internet back. We, you know, had a very slow version of the internet, but we didn't spend much time on it. We had no idea he was coming. It may have been an announced visit. I don't know. It wasn't announced to us, though. But anyways, I was telling him about me guarding the piece of tape, and he's like, well, I got to guard something a little bit funner than that. And he started telling me what he did. And his assignment was in the billeting, the hotel building, and he was positioned right outside of the president's door. He had a little desk set up. He was armed, and his job, I guess, he wasn't doing entry control. I guess it was just another layer of security. Of course, there was Secret Service everywhere. But his job was to sit there at that desk by that door and just make sure nobody interrupted the president while he slept. That's all he was doing, was sleeping. There wasn't anything else going on in there. Well, there was Bill Clinton, so I don't know. But anyways, he was telling me about it, and he's like, they put him at this desk, And he was there, you know, I don't know, an hour or so. And it was getting kind of late at this point. It was maybe 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And here comes Bill Clinton. They told him to get up and like go stand at the end of the hallway. And here comes Bill Clinton with his entourage and his Secret Service and all that. And he goes into the hotel room and he closes the door. So then they tell him to come back down and, like, you know, he's in for the night. Just sit here, don't let anybody in. And, you know, probably just for show, but, you know, maybe it was an extra layer of security. I don't know. The Secret Service was there all night long. But anyways, he was sitting there and he said about, now, we're all new cops, you know, we're all very low ranking and just, you know, still green cops, you know. And we're supposed to do like a salute and a post briefing when our base commander comes to our post, or even our flight commander. We're supposed to, you know, there's a post briefing we're supposed to offer and all that. But they didn't give him any instructions on what to do. They just told him to sit at that desk and don't let anybody go in. And of course, there was, again, you know, a whole team of Secret Service agents all around the hallways that would have stopped him. But I think it was basically just for show. But at the end of the hallway, down where he was standing, was a soda machine and a candy machine. And everybody knows that Bill Clinton loved his candy. And he said about 11:30 or so, that door opened up and here comes Bill Clinton walking out. And he's like, I just froze. He's like, I didn't know what to do. Do I offer him a post briefing? You know, he's thinking, does the president even know what a post briefing is? You know, I don't know. But he comes out and he looks at him, you know, and he starts talking to him, just like a normal conversation. Just a normal dude having a normal conversation. And my buddy's like, he was scared to death, you know. He's like, he tried to calm down and play it cool, you know. And he was just asking him how long he had been there, just, you know, kind of shooting this crap with him, you know. Then he went down to the candy machine and he got him some peanut M&Ms and a Diet Coke. And he came back, and before he went back in, you know, he's still talking, you know, how's your family, blah, blah, blah. He said he was a very friendly guy, a very nice guy. And he's like, well, hey, have a great night. And he went back in and closed the door. And that was it. So when the president came, I volunteered to go. Of course, not really volunteer, but you get it. And I got to guard the piece of tape, and my best friend got to sit right outside the president's door. Now, let's talk about aliens. It wasn't but a few days later that we got another 3030 recall. Now, these things were not very common. They did not happen all the time. I mean, I was there for 2 years, and maybe besides these two we had that weren't practice, maybe just one or two more. Now, I think we practiced it like every 3 months or something. They had to do one. But this one was unplanned, unexpected, unannounced. The klaxon just went off. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. And we didn't know what was going on. And, you know, there was no, they usually told us when a 3030 was going to happen, unless it was a true emergency, you know. And that's what we were training for, is for the true emergencies. And so anyways, the klaxon went off and we all started getting up. I walked out, got dressed, walked outside, and there's my best friend standing there who had guarded the president. This is only about 3 or 4 days later. And he's like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. And but we all kind of wanted to go because we're like, this is not normal. This has never happened before. And so we get down to the guard mount hut, and everything was not frantic, but definitely hurried. Hurry up, arm up, get into formation. Let's go. We got to go. And so we armed up. We get to the guard mount hut. We stand in formation, and they start the briefing. And they said an exotic aircraft was coming in and needed to be secured. And there was like, I don't know if it was a medical emergency with the pilot or something, I don't know. But it was definitely U.S. Air Force. It was definitely cleared to land on our base. And So we're like, okay, you know, I mean, that's a worthy cause, you know, to help a pilot. There was some sort of problem. I don't know what it was, you know. I think it was kind of something medical with the pilots. But anyways, so we go out and we stand guard around the base. Now, where the planes actually taxied to and after they landed was called Papa Hard Stand, and that's just what they called it. I don't know why, but that was the term for it. And so I was kind of out really far, you know, and but after it was all over with, I was talking to my buddy, the same one who had been in there with the president, and I saw him like the next day, and he almost looked gray. I mean, so I could tell something was wrong, you know. I went up to him, I was like, hey man, what's going on? You're just not yourself. And he almost like starts tearing up. And this guy was a big dude, you know. I mean, he was my age. We were in our early 20s. And, you know, I don't remember anybody crying. Now, it was the Air Force or the Chair Force or the Gay Force, whatever the other branches wanted to call us. So it was nowhere near like being in the Army or Marines or anything like that. It was very laid back. It was always said that if you scored too high on your ASVAB, you had to go into the Air Force. So we're all just normal kids, you know, and but we took our job seriously. We enjoyed it, and we did take it seriously. But something was wrong with him, and I kind of we went into the day room where there's like a kitchen and a theater seating and all that kind of stuff, and nobody else was in there, and I was like, hey man, what's wrong? I had thought like maybe he had gotten, like something happened to him, got beat up or got molested. I mean, I didn't know what was going on, but I just knew he was not his normal fun self. And I was like, hey man, what's wrong? And he's like, we go in the day room, and he's like, I don't even know if I'm supposed to be telling you this. He's like, nothing was classified because they denied it ever even happened. So I guess it can't be classified if they say it never happened. But, all right, anything with a stinger needs to go away. Anyways. So we kind of sit down. I sit down on one of the chairs, and he sits down on like the edge of one of the chairs, and he's like, I gotta tell you what happened, man. And I was like, about what? He's like, you remember that recall? I was like, yeah, you got to see the president and all that? And he's like, no, the second one. I was like, yeah. And he's like, something happened. And I was like, no, it didn't. I was there. I was on the same recall. They told us that we were going to stand guard around the base, you know, where they dropped us off at, and until this plane came and landed, they were going to, you know, treat the pilot or whatever, and then take back off and leave. We were only out there 3 or 4 hours, something like that. It wasn't a very long recall, and no plane ever landed. I mean, I was at the end of the airfield. No plane landed. I would have seen any plane landed. And I told him, I said, no, the plane must have been diverted or something. Nothing happened. I was like, I was standing right next to the airfield, and nothing landed. And he's like, yes, it did. And I was like, what? He's like, yes, it did. Now, they told us an exotic plane, which I had never really heard that term before. I had heard experimental planes, I had heard high value planes, VIP planes. I had never heard the term exotic, but I didn't think anything of it. Man, you know, it just kind of rolled off the back of my head, you know, like maybe he used the wrong word or something, you know. He never explained what airplane. It didn't matter to us what kind of airplane it was. We weren't there to care about what kind of airplane. We were just there to provide security. So, but nothing ever landed. So I just thought maybe the plane got diverted or something, and they changed their mind, or that maybe the pilot started feeling better. I don't know. But we all left, and there wasn't even a debrief at the end of it. We just all turned our guns in, and we went home. But I'm telling you, he looked gray, and he's like, something did land. And I was like, well, what was it? I never heard or saw. I mean, jets are very loud, you know. There's no mistaking a jet landing. He's like, no man, a plane landed. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And so he had a top secret clearance. He was the same one that was standing outside of or sitting at the desk with the president. And when you're guarding any type of high value plane, the entry control point is always at the nose of the aircraft. So there would be ropes around it, and then there would be typically guards standing around it. And the entry control point, or ECP, was at the nose of the plane. And nobody was supposed, I don't care if it was the president, Jesus, whoever, nobody is supposed to go into the circle except through the nose. And then the person at the nose would check the credentials and all that kind of stuff, and go, except for the pilots. You never check the pilots' credentials. They were they were untouchable. But we still kind of knew who they were, and if it was somebody that, anyways. But like maintenance, fuel, the base commander, anybody could not go into that aircraft or near that aircraft until they were checked out by the ECP guard at the nose of the plane, which was my best friend. And I said, well, what happened? And he's like, well, we were standing out there, and this plane taxied to us. And I was like, okay, well, keep going. It's like, I never saw or heard anything. And he's like, it was there. So he said this plane taxied. He used the word taxied. But once it got into the Papa Hard stand and they put up the ropes around it and he stood at the nose of the plane, there was no wheels. It was just floating there. And he said it was this huge black triangle, about the size of like a 737. But it would have been like if the 737 was connected, into a triangle shape, that's what this thing would have looked like. And he said that like a hatch opened underneath it and 2 Air Force pilots got out. And he said, but they were in different types of flight suits that he had never seen. And they were wearing these big helmets that had this big black guard around it. And he said they got out and they took off these helmets and they put them on a stand or something that was attached to the plane, like it was designed to hold that helmet. It had to have been heavy. He said it was really big. And he's like, the pilots came walking out, didn't say a word to him, of course. You don't ever talk to the pilots, rarely. And the pilots got onto a transport bus that came out, and they left. And he's standing here looking at this plane, and he's like, he didn't know what to make of it. He said he could tell it was a plane, but it had this big red circle in the middle of it that he said when it taxied in, it made an electrical humming sound. And I was like, well, describe that a little bit more. And he's like, what he said was, the sound a hummingbird makes? And he says, think of that sound, but with electricity. He's like, you could almost feel it. And it just made this low, very low hum. The way I took it, it was more a feeling than a hearing of a humming. He said you could feel it. But it taxied in like a normal airplane would, and it parked where it was supposed to park. And he said he was just looking at this thing, and it was just in awe. It had a big red circle, and then on each end of the triangle was a white circle. And they were very low, like he said he could tell that they were on. It was kind of like parking lights, it didn't have the red and blue or red and green flashing lights on the wings. If it did, he said he didn't see any. And again, it really didn't have any wings. It was just a triangle. He said it was fairly large, and it didn't have any markings on it like U.S. Air Force or anything like that. And he's just, now when you're at the ACP, you're kind of standing forward and you're guarding, you're checking IDs of everyone who's approaching and all that. But you're not really you know, you not turn around just gawking at the plane, but he did see it, and he's like, it was the weirdest thing he had ever seen. So he was there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it was, and they brought the pilots back. And the base commander was with the pilots. Now, I don't know if this had anything to do with the president's visit or not. The president was already long gone. The president spent the night and left, as far as we know. I mean, I guess you never really know, but it just happened so close together. I don't know if it was a coincidence or if it was part of it. But anyways, so the pilots came back. They were talking with the base commander and a couple other people, you know, a couple of maintenance looking people. And my friend was just standing there, you know, kind of in the very middle of where these people were just talking, and they were just kind of ignoring them, you know, which is fine. We're low on the totem pole security guards, you know, and but everybody had left, and the pilots were starting to get ready to get back into the plane. And he was standing like right next to my friend. He was getting ready, he was putting his gloves on and getting ready to put that big helmet back on, and he looked over at him and was like, "Hey, that's pretty cool, isn't it?" Not my friend, the pilot said, "Hey, that's pretty cool," and pointing at the plane. And my friend was like, "Yeah, that's unique." It's like, "I've never seen a plane like that before." He's like, "Oh, this is a special one. We really enjoy flying this one." And he's like, "Hey, you want to see something cool?" Now they're standing 5 feet off the nose of this plane. The ECP is like right at the nose. And that pilot takes his hand, puts it on the airplane, and pushes up. And that entire airplane lifted up. And then he took his hand and he pulled it back down. He's like, "That's pretty cool, isn't it?" And my friend just said he's about to pass out. He's like, he didn't know what he just witnessed was what just happened. And then the pilots got in the thing. They taxied off and flew away. And it never landed on the airfield, or at least I didn't see anything land on the airfield. Now, if this thing's capable of just hovering off the ground silently, then maybe it just took off right where it was at. I don't know. But it was definitely American Air Force pilots. It was not little green men. But this is a plane that I have since sort of learned what it was, and it's called a TR-3B. You can look that up on your own time and see what it can do. But there's been sightings of these things all around the world, and now this was back in 1999. So, you know, 26 years ago, whatever it's been. So it wasn't aliens, it was definitely American Air Force pilots, but this thing was not of Earth. I mean, there's speculation, you can go down all kinds of rabbit holes, but you know, reverse engineering comes to mind, that kind of stuff, but it was not a normal plane. It's nothing that has ever been acknowledged, you know, like the SR-71, it was eventually acknowledged. The U-2 spy plane was eventually acknowledged. They denied it, you know, for years. But this thing, in his words, was not from Earth. But it was definitely ours. You know, he said you can just look at a plane and tell it's an Air Force plane. But he said it was nothing like anything that anybody knows about. So during our 30-30 recalls, I got to guard the president. He got to guard the aliens. See you soon.